Hey you guys, welcome back to Naya
and Megan
Book Reviews! So today we're going to be talking about the book The Second Sex.
This book is written by Simone de Beauvoir.
So Megan, what led you to read this book?
I was inclined to read this book because I think it's very important to have pieces of literature that are about feminism and about women, and I feel like some people just have like in society, like a lot of people think it's like an uncomfortable subject, and I think it should be more like put into people's lives and more talked about, yeah. And I think it's very important, and that's why I wanted to read this book, just to have more knowledge on feminism and like how women were treated like in the early days and how they're treated now, just to see like the progression.
Yeah.
And what about you?
So I also agree with what you said. I definitely read it so that I could get more of like the historical aspect of femininity, and like also she talks a lot about like different psychologists and stuff that she kind of debunks and things like that. So it was interesting to kind of see like her take on certain theories from psychologists in the past and more in the present too, and just to relate everything that she said to like how it is now was really interesting. So throughout this book, de Beauvoir's main thesis was about how men oppress women by characterizing them as the other, and she kind of shows this in the title because it's literally called The Second Sex, referring to women, because we weren't the first, and it just shows that we were considered less than men, and that's why she kind of shows how they described us as the other and not like people.
Yeah, and she also like expresses how men are seen as essential and absolute, and women are not. They're the opposite. They're inessential and they're incomplete and not needed in society.
So there's a couple themes in this book, and one of them that we will be talking about is nature versus nurture. So this idea touches on the idea that women's inferiority is not based off of natural causes, but it's based off the upbringing of children. So it's not natural, it's based off of like things that have happened and how they were raised.
Beauvoir talks about how men have been conditioned in their upbringings to be very almost like stoic and very macho, like they have a very macho mentality, which is usually kind of like against women. And in order for there to be any type of change, men need to be educated more openly and more like willing to understand like the women's like side of society, and like in order for anything to happen, we need that. Another theme in this novel is production versus reproduction. And in society, women were mostly seen as only reproductive beings, that they can only reproduce. And the author argues that women can be producers and reproducers.
So what it means to be a producer is when you are like actively in the economy, like you're working on a job and not just at home. And in the past, like when she was writing this book, it was expected that women were supposed to stay home, take care of the kids, cook, clean, and all of that. And when she says that women can also be producers, it means that they can work for the economy. They can do jobs that men can do. But the problem was in that time, it was like women had to do this, they couldn't do that, Mm-hmm. So she believed that the nuclear family should be reconfigured so that it made it possible for women to also go out and do jobs and not only have to take care of the kids all day. So one important quote in this novel is, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." I think that this is really powerful because when she talks about this, she's talking about how women aren't born women, like what society believes women should be. They're raised to become the women that society wants, which is a woman that is submissive, inferior, will do whatever the man wants, will reproduce, and just work, cook, and clean, at the house. So it's just her saying that like if women were treated differently at a young age and raised to, have self-respect and be out in the world and know that they're not just beings of reproduction and cleaning and cooking. So I think that that's kind of the power of this quote.
Another notable quote is that women enjoys the privilege of irresponsibility. And the irresponsibility relates to how women were set in like a comfortable like area to where they didn't have to worry about like the responsibilities of the real world, like how men did in society. And it just instilled a fear on women that if they branched out to be their own beings, they would have to do other things like work, and it just wasn't a comfortable conversation for women in that time.
In the novel, the author mentions a couple important historical figures, some of them being Sigmund Freud, Alfred Adler, and St. Catherine of Siena.
The author debunks Sigmund Freud's theories of the development in women, such as the theory of sexuality, and the author further expresses her ideas on that.
Yes, and then the next one is Alfred Adler, and he kind of had the idea of the inferiority complex, and which talks about how women have to be submissive to men. And she talks about this because she doesn't agree with it, and it was just such a popular belief in the history of women, because women had to, do whatever their husbands told them to. They had to do things for them, and she basically kind of just disagrees with it and expresses how she believes that women shouldn't have to be submissive to the men.
And then another mention is St. Catherine of Siena, and she was a nun that was praised by the author because she went against the authority of many men her age, and she kind of branched out, and she was just against like the societal norms of women being submissive to men.
Yeah, she was basically just a really great example of a woman in the past who took the initiative.
Mm-hmm. We need more of those. The most important symbol in this novel is the praying mantis. And the reason why this is the most important is because it represents the transcendence of women. And the reason why is, you'll never believe it, is that the female praying mantis will devour the male praying mantis after intercourse.
On a serious note, what she's trying to do with this is she's trying to show women going against the patriarchy, and it kind of just shows how the women were, like, the female praying mantis devours the male praying mantis, and it shows that she has a higher status than him because she's the one destroying him, not the other way around, So she's trying to show, like, that oppositeness and how it was in the past, and also women who are regarded as too aggressive or powerful would be considered a praying mantis. And in the past, that was a derogatory term. But now, that would be, like, an iconic thing.
It would
be a girl boss.
It'd be girl boss.
Exactly.
100%.
Yeah. So the author, Debbie Viewer, uses a more critical, philosophical tone in this book because she's showing facts and like historical events and historical people to back up her claims and beliefs about femininity and sexism and all that stuff. So it's not just her being like, I believe this, so you should believe it. It's her giving evidence to back it up in order for people to believe her.
Yeah, and this tone like ensures her use of ethos and her credibility towards the reader. And she also uses logos within her writing to present like a logical way of thinking to the reader instead of just like emotional ways of thinking.
Exactly. So to close this podcast off, we're going to tell you guys why we will recommend this book.
So Naya, why do you recommend this book?
I think that this book offers a really credible and logical example of what femininity and sexism was in the past, and kind of just broadened my eyes to like the history and just gave me an overall better understanding.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I think it's very important like within society for people to have these pieces of literature, and for even like young women to read these things and to see like how the world used to be and how some people used to have these like negative mentalities and how like we've improved as a society and that we need to improve even more. Mm-hmm. And I think it'll just help young women as a whole and young men become better people within society and just within themselves as individuals.
Exactly.
And I think that's always important, always.
Mm-hmm. So yeah,
thank you
for watching. Bye.